Imagine this: your life, a tapestry woven with trust and love, suddenly ripped apart. Not by a stranger, not by a distant enemy, but by the two people you held closest in your heart, your husband and your own sister. A betrayal so deep, so viscerally shocking, it leaves you breathless, questioning everything you thought was real. You catch them, in your own bed, in the ultimate act of treachery. What do? How do you even begin to process such a monstrous deceit? Most people would crumble. Most would lash out in a fiery, uncontrolled rage. But not our protagonist. Oh no, her pain, her shock, her absolute disbelief, it slowly, meticulously, began to harden into something far more dangerous, far more calculated. And when her daughter, who witnessed the gut-wrenching scene, stepped in, the game changed entirely. Because what she did next, what this daughter orchestrated, cost her father and her aunt everything. And I mean everything. Their reputations, their financial stability, their social standing, their very sense of security, all systematically dismantled, brick by agonizing brick. Music swells slightly, then softens. Welcome back to Voices of Auntie Lily, your ultimate destination for ProRevenge narratives. Here, we don't just tell stories. We dissect the intricate, often brilliant, strategies behind the most satisfying acts of calculated retribution. We explore the human psyche pushed to its breaking point and the ingenious ways justice, however unconventional, finds its way. Before we unravel this truly unforgettable tale of familial betrayal and chillingly precise payback, do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment of this deep dive into how a daughter punished her husband, her father, after we caught him in bed with my sister. This is a story that will stay with you long after the credits roll. A 1T30-1000s, the build, up and betrayal, setup phasey narrator. Our story revolves around Sarah, a woman in her late 40s whose life, on the surface, seemed idyllic. She was a successful architect, a loving mother to her daughter, Chloe, and a devoted wife to Mark, a charismatic sales executive. They had a beautiful home, 2 cars, and what appeared to be a rock-solid 20-year marriage. They were the couple everyone admired, the picture of domestic bliss. Chloe, their daughter, was in her early 20s, bright, ambitious, and just finishing her master's degree in digital marketing. She adored both her parents, seeing her father, Mark, as the pillar of strength and her mother, Sarah, as the nurturing heart of the family. Then there was Lisa, Sarah's younger sister. Lisa was a free spirit, a bit adrift, and often relied on Sarah and Mark for support, both emotional and sometimes financial. Sarah, being the ever-supportive older sister, always welcomed Lisa into their home, especially during difficult times. Lisa had recently gone through a bad breakup and had been staying with Sarah and Mark for a few months, getting back on her feet. Sarah saw it as a temporary arrangement, an act of sisterly love. Oh, how tragically naive she was. The first cracks in Sarah's perfect world were subtle, almost imperceptible. Late nights for Mark at the office became more frequent. He started being unusually secretive with his phone, always keeping it face down, always taking calls in another room. Sarah, trusting by nature, initially dismissed these as signs of a demanding job. But a nagging unease, a cold knot in her stomach, began to form. She'd catch Lisa and Mark exchanging glances that lingered a fraction too long, laughter that seemed a little too intimate when Sarah wasn't looking directly at them. She tried to tell herself she was imagining things, that it was paranoia fueled by stress. The tension in the house grew thick, an unspoken, suffocating presence. Sarah felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a quiet conspiracy forming around her. Her once vibrant home began to feel alien, the air heavy with unspoken secrets. She started feeling isolated, like an outsider in her own life. Chloe, perceptive and intelligent, also noticed the change. She saw the way her aunt, Lisa, would touch her father's arm a little too often, the way Mark would defend Lisa in minor disagreements with Sarah with an almost aggressive intensity. Chloe voiced her concerns to her mother, but Sarah, in her desperation to preserve her perfect family image, brushed them aside, attributing them to Chloe being overly protective. The night it all came crashing down was a Tuesday. Sarah had returned early from a work trip, intending to surprise Mark with his favorite dinner. She let herself in, the house eerily quiet. A sense of foreboding settled over her as she walked down the hall towards their bedroom. The door was ajar. A low murmur of voices, a soft laugh she recognized as Lisa's, drifted out. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum against her ribs. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn back, to ignore the truth. But she couldn't. With a tremor in her hand, Sarah pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her shattered her world into a million irreparable pieces. There they were, Mark and Lisa, in her bed. Her husband, her sister. A cold, calculated betrayal. The air was sucked from her lungs, the world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a grotesque violation of every sacred bond she held dear. It was a dagger twisted deep into the very core of her existence. Music swells again, more dramatic, then cuts out suddenly to an unsettling silence. Narrator for a moment, Sarah could only stand there, frozen, a silent scream trapped in her throat. The shock was so profound it bordered on physical pain. Her husband, her sister. The two people she loved and trusted most. It was an image seared into her mind, an unholy tableau of deceit that would haunt her forever. It was Chloe who found her. Chloe had arrived home moments after Sarah, curious about the unusual silence. She saw her mother, pale and trembling, clutching the doorframe, her eyes wide with a horror that transcended tears. Following her mother's gaze, Chloe saw it too. The gasp that escaped Chloe's lips was sharp, guttural, a sound of pure anguish and disbelief. The betrayal wasn't just Sarah's, it was Chloe's as well. Her father, her aunt, complicit in an act that destroyed their family from the inside out. The following days were a blur of raw emotion. Mark and Lisa, caught red-handed, were initially defiant, then tried to beg, to rationalize, to minimize. But there was no rationalizing this. The damage was done. The trust was obliterated. Sarah felt like she was wading through thick, suffocating air. Her world had not just shattered, it had dissolved into an acid bath of pain and disgust. Chloe was equally devastated, grappling with the gut-wrenching realization that her father, her hero, was capable of such a heinous act. The bond between mother and daughter, however, grew stronger in this shared crucible of agony. They clung to each other, two anchors in a sea of betrayal. Sarah tried to initiate divorce proceedings, but Mark, sensing the impending financial ruin, became obstructive, dragging his feet, hiding assets, attempting to paint Sarah as an irrational, hysterical woman. He even dared to suggest Lisa was the victim, coerced into something she didn't want. The audacity was breathtaking. Lisa, for her part, vanished for a few days, only to re-emerge with a carefully crafted narrative of being manipulated, a helpless pawn in Mark's game. Neither of them showed an ounce of genuine remorse. They only showed self-preservation, a desperate scramble to escape accountability. The $120 the turning point in planning, the strategy, narrator, the turning point didn't come with a bang, but with a quiet, icy resolve. It was a week after the discovery, during a particularly frustrating, infuriating phone call with Mark's lawyer, who smugly informed Sarah that Mark was going to fight her for everything, citing her emotional instability. Sarah hung up the phone, her hand shaking not with fear, but with a nascent fury. She looked at Chloe, who had witnessed the call. Chloe's face was a mirror of her mother's despair, but beneath it a spark of fierce protectiveness shone. The sound of a phone being slammed down, then silence, narrator, in that moment. Something shifted deep within Sarah. The helplessness, the grief, the bewilderment, it all crystallized into a cold, hard decision. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about justice. This was about making sure Mark and Lisa faced the true consequences of their actions, consequences that went far beyond mere legal separation. This wasn't just revenge, this was pro-revenge. But it was Chloe who truly spearheaded the plan. Her brilliant mind, trained in digital marketing and strategy, seeing angles and opportunities Sarah, blinded by pain, couldn't. Chloe looked at her mother, her eyes steely. "Mom," she said, her voice calm but resolute, "they think they can get away with this. They think they can bleed you dry and walk away unscathed. But they don't know who they're dealing with. They don't know us." Slightly uplifting, determined background music begins subtly narrator. The seeds of retribution were planted right then and there. This wasn't going to be a messy, emotional outburst. This was going to be a game of chess, meticulously planned, legally sound, and utterly devastating. Their revenge wouldn't be about physical harm. It would be about systematically dismantling Mark and Lisa's lives, piece by agonizing piece, striking them where it would hurt the most: their reputations, their livelihoods, and their carefully constructed public images. Chloe laid out the initial framework. Dad is obsessed with his image, his successful businessman persona. Aunt Lisa cares most about what other people think of her and her social standing. We hit them there. The planning phase became an intense, almost obsessive project for Sarah and Chloe. They worked in secret, often late into the night, compiling evidence, researching legal loopholes, and strategizing their every move. Here's what their meticulous plan involved: documentation. Sarah had kept meticulous financial records for years, a habit from her architectural business. Now, these records became invaluable. Chloe advised her to covertly gather more specific evidence of Mark's financial malfeasance, any attempts to hide assets, any questionable transactions, any business dealings that might skirt ethical lines. Chloe also helped Sarah secure phone records, text messages, ziklos from before the discovery, hinting at the affair, and any other digital breadcrumbs that could prove the long-standing nature of the affair and Mark's deceit. Sarah also made a detailed diary, documenting specific dates, times, and observations related to Mark and Lisa's behavior. The digital footprint trap. Chloe, with her expertise in digital marketing, knew the power of online reputation. She began to subtly monitor Mark and Lisa's social media activity. She knew Mark was very active on LinkedIn, cultivating a professional image. Lisa was a frequent poster on local community groups and Facebook, often portraying a lier than thou persona. Chloe began archiving their public posts, looking for inconsistencies, hypocritical statements, or anything that could be weaponized later. She also discreetly created burner accounts on various platforms to observe without being detected. The professional network erosion. Mark's career was built on networking and trust. Chloe identified key professional contacts. Mark had mentors, clients, and colleagues who valued integrity. The goal wasn't to immediately expose him, but to subtly plant seeds of doubt. They drafted anonymous, but legally sound, letters to certain industry watchdogs and regulatory bodies, merely inquiring about ethical conduct in sales or conflicts of interest, without naming Mark directly, but providing enough context to raise red flags that would be looked into later. The sisterly syndicate, a misnomer. Lisa relied heavily on her social circle and community involvement for validation. Chloe knew that direct confrontation would make Lisa play the victim. Instead, they decided on a slow burn strategy. Sarah, maintaining a stoic, wounded silence in public, allowed mutual friends to naturally ask about the divorce. She wouldn't accuse directly, but would respond with carefully chosen, ambiguous phrases like, "It's been a truly devastating betrayal from those I trusted most," or, "Some wounds cut deeper when they come from family." These carefully placed statements, delivered with a heartbroken demeanor, would sow seeds of suspicion without providing direct, actionable accusations that Lisa could immediately refute as slander. The legal tightening. Sarah switched lawyers, finding one known for their aggressive stance against dishonest spouses. Armed with the meticulously gathered evidence, her new lawyer was able to apply significant pressure on Mark regarding the divorce settlement, exposing his attempts to hide assets and showcasing the extensive nature of his infidelity with Lisa. This was crucial for the financial aspect of the revenge. Music becomes more intricate, building suspense and a sense of cleverness. Narrator. This wasn't impulsive. This was surgical. Every move was considered. Every potential counter move by Mark and Lisa was anticipated. Chloe was the tactical mastermind, while Sarah provided the emotional strength and the invaluable insider knowledge of Mark's weaknesses and Lisa's vulnerabilities. They understood that to truly make them pay, they couldn't just win a legal battle, they had to strip away everything Mark and Lisa valued most. They practiced their narratives, their facial expressions, their responses to anticipated questions. They built a timeline, a precise sequence of events for their carefully orchestrated payback. This wasn't just about making them suffer. It was about ensuring that their suffering was directly proportional to the pain they had inflicted. This was about sending a clear, unambiguous message. You betray us, and you will pay a price you never imagined. The waiting was the hardest part, but it was also the most crucial. Patience, Chloe reminded her mother, was their most potent weapon. So 2800 the execution, the payback narrator, the stage was set. The pieces were in place. And when the time was right, Sarah and Chloe began to execute their meticulously planned revenge, watching with a grim satisfaction as Mark and Lisa's carefully constructed worlds began to crumble. Music becomes tense, building rapidly with a sense of impending doom. The first blow landed subtly, almost imperceptibly, in Mark's professional life. Chloe, using her understanding of digital algorithms and SEO, began a subtle campaign. She didn't post direct accusations. Instead, she created a series of anonymous blog posts and forum discussions on ethical leadership in competitive industries, the hidden costs of infidelity on professional reputation, and when personal failings impact corporate trust. These posts were carefully crafted to be generic enough to avoid direct libel, but specific enough in their underlying themes to resonate with anyone who knew Mark's situation. She made sure these posts would surface in search results related to his company and his specific industry. Simultaneously, Sarah's lawyer, armed with the undeniable evidence of Mark's financial deceit and the long-standing affair, began to leverage it in the divorce proceedings. The lawyer didn't just present the evidence, they exposed Mark's attempts to hide assets, showcasing his dishonesty not just as a husband, but as a potentially untrustworthy individual. This wasn't just about alimony, it was about painting a picture of a man who lacked integrity. Sound of a phone ringing incessantly, then a hang-up. Narrator Mark started receiving subtle, uncomfortable questions at work. Clients who had been loyal for years began to express vague concerns about corporate stability or leadership integrity. His professional network, once a source of pride, began to subtly distance themselves. Invitations to industry events dwindled. He couldn't put his finger on it, but the air around him at work had changed. He felt a chill, a creeping sense of being watched, judged, and found wanting. The anonymous letters Sarah and Chloe had sent months prior were now being quietly investigated, leading to internal audits at his company that, while not directly accusing him of anything illegal yet, certainly raised uncomfortable questions about his conduct and management style. Meanwhile, Lisa's social world began its own slow implosion. Sarah, maintaining her dignified silence, would occasionally attend local community events. When approached by mutual acquaintances, she would sigh, look away, and simply say, "It's all so painful. I never imagined such betrayal could come from my own sister." She never explicitly accused Lisa, but her pained demeanor and carefully chosen words, coupled with the now whispered rumors of Mark's divorce, were enough. People started putting two and two together. Chloe then took it a step further. She created a completely anonymous, unidentifiable social media profile, using it to like and share news articles about local scandals involving infidelity, or stories about sisters betraying sisters, often adding a generic, sympathetic comment like, "Such a shame when families are torn apart by deceit." She never named Lisa, never accused her. But the subtle, consistent digital breadcrumbs, appearing on the feeds of mutual acquaintances, reinforced the spreading rumors. Lisa began to feel the freeze. Friends stopped inviting her to coffee. Conversations would abruptly cease when she entered a room. Her calls and texts went unanswered. People would look at her with an unsettling mixture of pity and disgust. Her carefully cultivated image of the sweet, slightly troubled but well-meaning younger sister crumbled, replaced by the hushed whispers of homewrecker and backstabber. She tried to confront Sarah, to plead her innocence, to accuse Sarah of slander. But Sarah simply met her with a cold, unwavering gaze, saying, "You made your bed, Lisa. Now lie in it." Music builds to a crescendo, then pauses dramatically. Narrator. The ultimate blow for Mark came during a crucial sales presentation to a major potential client. He was confident, charismatic as always. But during the Q&A, a senior executive, who had clearly done their homework, looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Mr. Jenkins, your personal integrity is often tied to your professional brand. Can you assure us there are no unresolved ethical issues in your personal life that might compromise your standing or indeed, our future partnership. The question wasn't about the affair directly, but about ethical issues. The wording was perfect. Leveraging the subtle doubts planted by Chloe's digital campaign and Sarah's lawyer's revelations. Mark stammered, his carefully constructed facade cracking. His face paled as he realized the extent of the damage. He fumbled for an answer, but the damage was done. The client left, effectively ending the deal, a deal that would have been a massive boon for his company and his career. For Lisa, her moment of agonizing realization came during a town hall meeting for a local charity event she was trying to organize. She stood up to speak, but instead of the usual welcoming applause, there was an awkward silence. A prominent community member, a woman Lisa had always tried to impress, cleared her throat loudly and said, "I think, perhaps, we need to consider if our leadership represents the values of integrity and family honor we uphold. Some actions reflect poorly on the entire organization." The message was unmistakable. Lisa was publicly, implicitly, shamed. She saw the whispers, the averted eyes, the knowing glances. Her social standing, her carefully built reputation, was in ruins. She fled the meeting in tears. So 2830 Helzer, the fallout and aftermath, the conclusion, narrator. The consequences for Mark and Lisa were absolute and irreversible. Mark, unable to recover from the blow to his professional reputation, coupled with the internal scrutiny prompted by the anonymous reports, found himself sidelined at work. He was eventually demoted, his once stellar career now irrevocably tarnished. The divorce settlement, thanks to Sarah's lawyer and the mountain of evidence, was heavily in Sarah's favor, leaving Mark with significantly less than he had anticipated, both financially and in terms of assets. He lost his social standing, his high-flying lifestyle, and the respect of his peers. He was a shell of the man he once was, ostracized, isolated, and forced to rebuild his life from scratch, a task made infinitely harder by his now stained professional history. Lisa faced a different kind of ruin. Her social life completely disintegrated. She was no longer welcomed in her community groups, charity organizations, or even casual social gatherings. The whispers followed her everywhere. Unable to cope with the public shaming and the loss of her social network, she eventually moved out of state, losing contact with most of her former friends and even her remaining family, who, disgusted by her actions, cut ties. Her attempts to find new relationships were constantly hampered by her past, which, in the age of information, seemed to follow her like a shadow. As for Sarah and Chloe, the path to recovery was long, but they walked it together. Sarah, though scarred, found a profound sense of peace and vindication. She had not only survived, she had triumphed. She thrived in her architectural career, focusing on her passions and rebuilding a life free from deceit. The experience, while devastating, had forged an unbreakable bond between her and Chloe. Chloe, in turn, emerged even stronger. Her strategic mind had not only saved her mother, but had also proven her own immense capability. She used her skills for good, building her own successful digital marketing firm, often taking on clients who needed help rebuilding reputations damaged by false accusations, understanding deeply the power of narrative and truth. Their revenge wasn't about violence or fleeting anger. It was about exposing the truth, about ensuring accountability, and about showing Mark and Lisa that actions have consequences that can be meticulously delivered, legally sound, and utterly devastating. They taught them that betrayal, especially familial betrayal, comes with a price that is paid not just in money, but in reputation, respect, and ultimately, in isolation. Say outro music begins, slightly reflective, but with a sense of closure and justice. Narrator, and there you have it, folks. Another gripping tale of calculated retribution here, on Voices of Auntie Lily. This story of a daughter punishing her husband after his betrayal with her sister isn't just about revenge. It's a stark reminder that karma, sometimes, needs a little help from a brilliant strategic mind and a mother's unbreakable resolve. What is the most satisfying revenge story you've ever heard? A tale where justice was served so perfectly, so precisely, it left you with a chill. Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more pro-revenge. Narratives that prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that even the deepest betrayals can be met with the most ingenious and ultimately profoundly satisfying payback.